Cathy, you ready?
I already started, I thought, by accident.
Cathy, you know, we all know that in 1987, the United States government designated March as Women's History Month.
Yes.
So we have a long history of that. And so we are delighted here at Our Minds, Our Voices that you could come and celebrate Women's History Month with us.
I'm particularly honored. Just the second day into the month, I'm in my favorite city in the whole wide world.
All right.
I can't tell you how many houses I've looked at. I have this son who's an only child, and every time I come close to finding the house that I love in Durham, he starts in on, you know how far away it is, Mama, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Alfred, you 54 years old. All right, okay. He's like, yeah, but I have a son and he's only 10 and that's a long ways. I love this city. I love the people here. I came down for many years to Duke Medical to get my physicals. I went to the Rice House and you can tell that they closed. Okay. And I just, you know, I often tell people that there was no place that was ideal to be enslaved. But if I had been a slave, I would have picked North Carolina as my residence, because here there's just a different quality of life. And so many Black-owned businesses,
Yes.
so many initiatives,
Yes.
so much sisterhood.
Yes.
And brotherhood. I know Philadelphia likes to take credit for being the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. You all need to steal that one.
Hey.
Okay, because that's really describes Durham. I mean, I can just be walking down the street and next thing I know, I have a new best friend.
Yes.
Okay, they'll just stop you and talk to you
Yes.
and make certain, and Duke Medical, quite frankly, I went back and sold wolf tickets to Hopkins, because the first time I went, there was a sign at the receptionist's desk that said, if we have not serviced you in 20 minutes, we are not doing our job. I said, get out of here. All right, usually it takes them 20 minutes to process the forms
Absolutely.
at other hospitals, but just the service. I mean, today's lunch, I don't know, Gia, if you picked the food, but that's the best food I have had in a hotel in a long time.
Absolutely.
That lunch was delicious.
Absolutely.
In fact, I happen to know one of the, in fact, she's Employee of the Year from last year. I've already got my little to-go soup for dinner. That's the type of thing. She says, oh, no problem, Miss Hughes. I'll be happy to get you some soup for dinner. Just, I love you all. I mean that quite sincerely. And my family members at Radio 1 in Raleigh don't like to hear it. I said, you all are right down the road. Okay, you worse than my son Alfred. Okay, I'm gonna live in Durham. Really, really mean that quite sincerely and quite respectfully. You all are an incredible community in an incredible state.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, Cathy. And the interview is over. No, oh, wait. That was so good. I was like, okay, what you said something that really kind of touched me a lot, because you've been able to do something that a lot of Black people have not been able to do. And that is, you have successfully created legacy. How is it working with your son? So you already talked about him not wanting you to come down here. How is it working with your son?
It's the most difficult challenge to generational businesses.
Okay.
The most difficult challenge. It's very hard to give the combination to the safe to the same kid who used to lose the key to the house on numerous occasions. And it's very difficult when you've created something to step aside, and even though you know mentally that you need to, if you're really going to grow and progress, it's very hard in your heart to let go. Your business is like your child.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult, and it holds us back. We have not been very skillful at generational businesses in the African American community. John Johnson was one of my mentors.
Okay.
And he used to get upset with me when I would say to him, Linda is overqualified. She grew up in this business. Let Linda take over Johnson Publishing, Mr. Johnson. Okay, she's ready. She's prepared. She loves you. So she's going to definitely make certain that your legacy is preserved. Mr. Johnson waited until he died, and within the first 5 years, Linda had to sell the company. Because it was too late.
Yes.
And that so often happens to us. And quite frankly, it was either close it or sell it. And she opted to at least keep the Ebony brand alive, because Mr. Johnson was going to stay past his time.
Yes.
And that's so easy to do. My thing was, my son is as opinionated as I am. So I literally had to go. There are psychiatrists and psychologists who specialize in generational businesses.
Oh.
I had to get one of each.
All right.
Because you all are familiar with the brand North Face.
Yeah.
So they build a brand new multi-million-dollar facility. The mama has one wing and the son has the other. That's how confrontational their relation is. They meet in the middle because their brand continues to grow. But
Yes.
literally, when they built their facility, they had not resolved the issue. And it's harder, I think, on a male child than it is when it's a mama running the business.
Yes.
He often has said, and he started saying it years ago when we had to bring in outside help to help us. I know that my career, my life would have been different if I had been following in my father's footsteps instead of following in my mother's footsteps. And so it was something I was determined to do, because one of the things that I studied was generational businesses. My greatest blessing is the fact that he embraced my vision. He took us to another level.
Yes.
He created TV One. He got us into I1 Digital.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but the hardest thing was letting him be totally in charge. Because I literally, at the advice of all these consultants, I said, I didn't pay you all this money for you all to tell me to get out the way. I said, his name's not at the bottom of this check.
Yeah.
I hired you, okay? But they told me that I needed to give it a rest.
Yes.
And I start realizing it when they gave me some trigger points to look for, like my staff, I have 11 people who have been with me since day one, and my company will be 40 years old next October 3rd.
Wow.
And they had no problem saying to him, I'll take it up with your mother.
Okay.
When they didn't like what he was telling
Okay.
them that needed to be done. So I literally had to take a hiatus. And so I called it exile, and Alfred's like, Ma, please stop using that term after all these years. But I literally moved to Baltimore.
Okay.
So that our staff in D.C. did not have that type of direct access to me. And that was the hardest thing. I would drive past my D.C. station and act all dramatic. I would be But I stayed in Baltimore for 5 years so that everyone got totally accustomed to him being in charge. Then this is a quick story, if you don't mind, Dr. Kim.
Go ahead.
So I'm hosting a morning show for 11 years. And I had it down, but Dick Gregory was my permanent guest. I said, you are not my co-host. This is the Cathy Hughes show, but you are my permanent guest. Dick would be in the studio reading his 50 newspapers that he read every single solitary day of his life. And I had it under control, so I sailed in there. So one morning I sailed in there about 10 minutes before airtime. My son was standing in the doorway, and he said, Mother, you're supposed to be here a minimum of 45 minutes before going on the air. I've been cutting you slack. Okay? Oh no, the story gets better. He says, I understand that, 30 minutes because you've been doing this and you really have it under control. He said, but I'm sorry. I'm going to have to write you up today. And he did. Put it in my personnel file. I said, I won't tell you what I called him, but I said, I shouldn't even have a personnel file, let alone have a reprimand in it from the CEO. He said, you can't set a bad example.
Absolutely.
For the rest of the staff.
Absolutely.
If you slide in here 10 minutes before airtime, they'll slide in here 10 minutes before airtime. And it taught me a very valuable lesson, quite frankly. That morning was like, you remember when the Aqua Velvet used to do the slap in the commercials? I was slapped that morning, just like that commercial. I was like, boing, because I realized that I had to really understand that he was the boss. And that when I was doing a radio show, I was no longer his mother. I was no longer the chairman of our board. Right. I was, in fact, an employee that had to adhere to the same rules and regulations. And that changed me, really, in my perception of him. But that's the greatest challenge. And, the greatest blessing is that he embraced our company and made it grow way past what I ever imagined. But the hardest challenge was really relenting and really letting him be in charge. And so those of you who have children in your businesses, realize when it's time for you to leave the party, because if not, you really jeopardize the growth and the future of the business. And we need generational businesses
Absolutely.
in the Black community.
Absolutely. But Cathy, here's what you just said kind of rang true with me. I have 2 children that are in business with me. They're much younger. They just came on the platform with me. And I'm an author, and my daughter, I've written about 30 books. My daughter is 20, has written 4 books.
Wow.
So I'm training her, and she goes speaking. But here's the thing, she still listens to me, but I know I got to move. And one of the great things about what you just said was that what he did was what you trained him to do.
Mm-hmm. Take charge.
Yeah, you trained him to do that. So that right there, that piece that he did with you was absolutely platinum legacy. Platinum legacy.
I'm glad you feel that way.
But it is.
No, it is. Like I said, it was like an Aqua Velvet. It was like,
yes.
Boom, a light bulb
Yes.
went off in my head, because I realized that he had matured enough to say
Yes.
that to me
Yes.
without me pulling rank on him, saying, you're not going to talk to me like that.
Yeah.
Okay? And live. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it makes a difference, and it's what other cultures have done.
Absolutely.
And when you build that generational business, sometimes the children, as in the case of a lot of Jewish businesses, yes. The children don't embrace it, but then the grandchildren have an opportunity to come in and take it over and continue to grow. The other thing that I've learned with age, I used to always hear the adage, I was like, what does that mean? That it's too bad that youth is wasted on the young.
Yes.
And that is so true, because I have really become aware of how critical it is to allow young people to make decisions, particularly in your business, because they don't have all the baggage.
No.
They don't know that in the 1980s, when I went into business, prime went into the mid-20s. I don't know how many of you remember that crash of the 1980s. I was paying 2.5%, 2.5 points over, not percentage, 2.5 points over prime. 1 quarter, my interest rate was 28%.
Jesus.
On $1 million. So it was virtually impossible. And it was a young guy at the SBA, a chemical bank, called in my guarantee. And this young man, 24 years old, fresh out of college. And I'm like, oh my God, I've been assigned to somebody who's young enough to be my child. He sat down with me and restructured my debt. He sat down with me and came up with some creative ways of me meeting my obligations. I never would have thought that a 24-year-old fresh out of college would have been the one. And again, I had one of those wake-up moments that this young man didn't have the fear that I was facing.
Right.
He didn't have all that baggage. And I listened to him. And I'm here today because that 24-year-old young man, literally, he worked for the government, SBA. And he sat down with me, and they love the SBA. I'm like their poster child. They love for me to tell you all this story because it's the truth.
Yes.
Fresh out of college, new ideas, went back, convinced the SBA, made my payments manageable, saw me through. He said to me, he said, listen, we don't control the Federal Reserve. They set the prime rate. You're going to have to pay this until this is going to be the rate that you'll be calculated at. He said, but everything goes in cycles. It's going to come down. He gave me a comfort level as if he had been in business for 50 years himself.
Wow.
But it taught me to open my receptors to young people.
Yes.
Now, sometimes they come up with some stuff that's a little wild for me, and I got to fasten my seatbelt. But I still listen to it, I analyze it, I think about it, and I encourage others. Because particularly this generation of millennials that we're dealing with now,
Yes.
most impressive about them is they're not going to get college degrees in order to go get a good job in corporate America. They're going to get college degrees to work for themselves and create jobs.
Absolutely.
Whole different way of thinking.
Absolutely.
You and I, you know, I
Absolutely.
mean, we told our children, go to college because then you'll have a career, you'll have a future, you'll be able to get yourself a good job. These kids are like, forget the good job, okay? I want a good business venture. And they're creating industries that never existed before.
Well, Cathy, my children are Gen Xers. I had my first child at 41, my second at 43. After I was told I couldn't have children.
Wow.
And what I did is I did something that most black people I knew wanted to kill me for, stone me. I pulled them out of school in 8th and 9th grade. And I said, you're not learning. And I trained them to think like entrepreneurs. And so now they're entrepreneurial. And now people are saying, can you help us? To me,
That's
so I
way
know
more
exactly
important.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's way more
And they're going to
important.
go to college later. I said, if I messed up, you can correct it in your 20s because you'll still be strong and focused. And they
You
said,
know what,
okay.
you and I are a lot alike because, you know, I tell, I teach a master class at Howard. I've been so blessed and honored. They named their School of Communications in my honor.
All right.
And so I
Yay! Yay!
So I do a master class.
Okay.
And I tell them because I always end the last 30 minutes of my master class, I try to concentrate on stress because that's the new buzzword with young people. I'm so stressed. At first, I tried the strategy that my elders tried with me. I said, you ain't old enough to be stressed.
Right.
Remember when we used to say, oh, I got a headache, Mama? Your mama said, you ain't old enough to get headaches.
That's right. Okay. That's right.
But I say to them, concentrate on your life being so fulfilled that whatever challenges you may have, stress or whatever, you'll have enough money to fix it.
Yeah.
I said, that's the best way to approach your stress.
Absolutely.
Make certain that you can afford some help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. His whole thread so blessed me because I'm so focused on legacy, and so many of us don't do it well.
Oh,
so
can I
thank
please
you.
speak on that for a minute?
You just got to.
Please. How many of you all are familiar with Juliana Richardson and the History Makers? Okay, if you're not, please make yourselves aware. And one of the things, her mantra right now is archiving. Most of our history is in possession of people from other cultures and ethnic groups.
It is, yes.
Because we did not understand the significance and the importance of archiving. We throw stuff away. We go in our grandmama's house or our aunt's and get this junk out of here. And if you read through, took the time, you would find stuff that needs, okay, we have a lot of hidden figures in the African American experience and culture. And so much of it we literally have thrown away while people from other cultures understood the significance of it.
Yes.
And started collecting it and archiving it. We have got to archive. We have got to, and I mean, people, well, you know, I used to facetiously say, they say, write a book. I said, well, when it gets longer than a pamphlet, I'll write it. And now I realize that that was a mistake because now I can't remember half the stuff I need to put in my book. Okay, but I learned a trick. They did an expose in the Washington Post about Katharine Graham. If any of you are writing books and you're having a hard time remembering, interview your friends. Okay, Katharine Graham spent 13 years before she released her first book about herself, interviewing her friends, just having conversations like you and I are having, and they would recount things that had occurred that had long been gone, particularly when you're working for yourself.
Yeah.
Right, Gia? When you work, you don't have time to be archiving and thinking, but you need help with that. Just save the stuff. Turn yourself into a hoarder of your stuff.
Yes.
Stick it in an attic or whatever and leave explicit instructions that it is not to be thrown away before it's read. Maybe it should be thrown away, but not before it's read. And research. Juliana is going all over the country telling people to please hold on to your documents, hold on to your sales agreements, hold on to every piece of paper, hold on to your pictures, because it's going to make a difference for a difference in the future of our Gen X.
That's
Those
right.
behind, because we've got some 11 and 12-year-olds. It fascinates me when these news commentaries get on and say, well, he should run for president. I'm like, the kid is 11 years old. But these kids are so different because of technology.
Yes.
The exposure, the thinking, and more importantly than anything else, the interaction with other children from around the entire globe. I mean, we didn't interact with people in other countries until we went to those countries. These children, by the time they're 6, 7, 8 years old, have talked to people and kids in China who could speak English and
Absolutely.
all over the globe.
Absolutely.
So please, I petition you, and I didn't mean to cut, but that's how you
No.
establish the legacy. You've got to keep your stuff. You've got to archive your existence. Because even if you're really a humble person, you don't think of yourself as being that important. You don't know 100 years from now that you might end up being the most important person involved in a sorority or in an organization or in a church.
Absolutely.
Or in your business. So please, please, please archive your existence. Save it, box it up. And if you got a little time on your hand, go through and put it in categories and organize it for them, and so that it makes sense.
It's a tapestry, really. We're
And it's
creating
that
a tapestry.
legacy that
And if
you're
you
talking
remove
about.
one piece, the tapestry becomes unraveled. That's what it is. So
Absolutely.
what she's saying is you all are very important. So keep your stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Very important. I don't care if somebody says, you need to throw that away. Don't listen. Because I
Right.
know I have boxes from 1980 something.
Yep.
And I want to throw them away, but I keep looking back because it's a part, tells my story. And I'm a storyteller, so I understand exactly what you're saying. That leads me to a part
You're
of your
Griot.
story. I am. That leads me to a part of your story that's always fascinated me. Back in the early 70s, I was raised in the military. And my father, when I was 5, I left Durham and went to Asia to live. And then I ended up living in Europe for 12 years and Asia for almost 5. So I was not really a part of the African-American community, so to speak. So when I went to Germany and my mother and father sent me back to Washington, D.C., I called my mother and told her, there's too many black people here. I need to come home. I was scared. Honestly, I was scared. And so, but then my cousin said, Gail, you need to get in touch with your blackness. So I said, okay, and guess what they told me to do?
What?
Go listen to Quiet Storm.
Ah.
And so, this is a true story. And so I said, what's a quiet storm? So let me tell you, Cathy, I turned on Quiet Storm and I became black.
Wait, a lot of sisters turned on Quiet Storm and they became pregnant.
I know! That happened too. My question is, how did you come up with that? And once you came up with the concept and you saw it implemented, how did you feel when you saw its meteoric rise?
Well, I didn't see it implemented. I implemented it. Number one, president of Shaw University, Dr. James Cheek, came to Howard University.
Okay.
And Howard University, D.C. had educated slaves. That's how far back
Yes,
education
yes.
goes. And quite frankly, Dr. Cheek wasn't well received because he came from Shaw, and they didn't consider Shaw big enough or important enough to qualify him. He was probably one of the more revolutionary, progressive presidents outside of this one we have now. Dr. Wayne Frederick is a surgeon, and He is the best president that Howard has ever had, in my opinion, although, you know, some of the historians might disagree. This brother still operates every Thursday. He is in surgery at the Howard University Hospital.
Now?
Now. And after he cuts off his surgery at 3 p.m., he teaches a class to surgeons.
Wow.
He refuses to sacrifice that which really turns him on, okay, what he loves. And I think that that's part of the reason he's doing such an incredible job. Back to Dr. James Cheek. He just basically adopted me. He said to me, I want to make you the first woman general manager, vice president general manager of a broadcasting facility in the nation's capital. I said, Dr. Cheek, I'm so honored, but I don't know how to do that. And so he said, don't worry, I'm going to get you prepared for it. And he sent me, at that time, they used to do a 6-week broadcast management course at Harvard. It's now down to like 10 days because of technology. You do a lot of it online. He sent me, I learned how to do broadcast management at the expense of Howard University. And I said to him, don't you think this is a little awkward that you sending me to Harvard? And he said, we can't teach it to you here, and I need for you to go learn it and bring it back. So he then sent me to the University of Chicago for a month to study psychographic programming.
Wow.
Because he, nor the students or anyone else was interested in what Howard University's radio station was doing. Fast forward real quick. Catherine Graham gave WTOP FM to Howard University that became WHUR, Howard University Radio. She was sued. When she challenged the Nixon administration, some of his supporters sued her for not living up to her fiduciary responsibility. This was before the advent of FM. She thought she was giving away the weak, sickly sister when she gave them the FM, because WTOP AM, the #1 news station to this day in Washington, D.C., was a high-powered AM. She didn't realize that FM was getting ready to come alive and kick AM right up the behind and replace them. And so those investors, those stockholders in the Post-Newsweek Corporation lost hundreds of millions of dollars when she gave away this station. It's the finest signal in the nation's capital, and it's in possession of Howard University, thanks to Catherine Graham. So the staff did not have internship programs for the kids. They were enjoying the glory of being on the radio in Washington, D.C. themselves, and they were doing what they call 360 degrees of blackness. So the night the Dr. Cheek and we were both listening to the radio, you know, and the next morning he called me over to his office. He said, did you happen to listen to the station last night? I said, yes, sir. Pharaoh Saunders has a album on which he holds one note for 19 minutes. It's like a world record. And they airing it on the radio. 19 minutes, one note. So Dr. Cheek said, you know, my name was Liggins then. He said, Miss Liggins, I talked to the students and they're not listening to that radio station. And I said, I know, Dr. Cheek. I said, I done fixed the sales area. Okay, thanks for you sending me off. I said, but the programming needs to be fixed. And he said, okay, we're going to find somebody to help you fix the programming. So I came back from the University of Chicago. Psychographic programming basically is programming media to fit the lifestyle of the people that you're serving. Okay, and so I know you like this story, right, Kim? Because she teaches this. So I come back and I do a research project, because at that time the highest ranking African American at Gallup polls was on the faculty in the School of Communications. And he did a survey for me. And it came back saying that one of the biggest complaints was from single, unattached women who didn't want to go to clubs or, you know, if their sorority was having something or their church, but they were uncomfortable not being entertained over the weekends. And so I created the Quiet Storm to keep sisters company who did not have dates.
Oh, Cathy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And so I came back, and Dr. Cheek once again stood by me because the jazz enthusiast, my mother was a very, very accomplished, they didn't even have jazz then, it was called swing. My mother founded an orchestra, 18-piece all-women's orchestra called the International Sweethearts of Rhythm. If you Google them, my mother has about 30 minutes worth of music on the internet right now. The International Sweethearts of Rhythm were in their rhythm in the 30s and early 40s. So I come back, and these jazz enthusiasts who won't buy jazz artists' records, don't go to their concerts. You go to a jazz, even with Wynton Marsalis, you'd be hard put to find another black person up in the audience. But Lord, if you change a radio format, they will march on you so fast, it'll make your head spin. They were marching around, and I don't know how many of you know anything about D.C. media, but Jim Vance was a legend in Washington, D.C. Media, an incredible broadcaster. He was the first one with the biggest sign, "Bring Jazz Back," marching around the facility. And Dr. Cheek said, stick to it. Okay, he says, stick to what you believe in, because they called the Quiet Storm bubblegum music. His successor refused to license it because Dr. Cheek left Howard shortly after, and I tried to convince them to license the Quiet Storm. Had Howard University licensed the Quiet Storm, it probably would have brought in what's estimated now to be about $2 to $3 billion. And they no longer would have had to have been a land-grant college.
Yes.
Those of you who are into education know that Howard is not a historically black college or university. It is a land-grant college. When I first went to work at Howard, I was a GS-10, and I got a government paycheck, and we had to requisition our payroll. It was Dr. Cheek who convinced, excuse me, Daddy Bush, in fact, to release the money to Howard to have their own bank account. We used to have to get paid the same way government employees got paid. And so, excuse me, his successor refused to let me license it. At one time, just based on us counting, and we don't know how many small communities like Slippery Rock, Arkansas, or Bismarck, North Dakota were doing it, we were able to count 480 radio stations were using my format and calling themselves the Quiet Storm. Howard University could have been paid with every single solitary one of those. Over these, you know, I've been in business for myself 40 years now, so we're talking about roughly 50 years, over 50 years. An economist who's a friend of mine estimated that anywhere between $2 to $3 billion is what they did not know was coming their way. And it's why I went into business, Dr. Gale, because I felt that God had really blessed me with a $1 billion baby. And I said, the next time, nobody will be allowed to throw my baby out the window and the bathwater behind it.
I know that's right. Woo! Yeah. I know that is right.
There's still radio stations in this country that call themselves the Quiet Storm.
Oh, yeah.
It revolutionized urban radio, but
yes, it did.
God rewarded me. God works, you know, you sometimes have to look between, okay? You don't realize that something's in a blessing because it looks like, oh my God, this missed opportunity, and it wasn't. When I needed to borrow $1 million to go into business, it was the #1 credential that Chemical Bank of New York saw and loaned me the $1 million because they knew what this format had done. And so they felt that I was a pretty good gamble for that first $1 million that I had to borrow, because if I had done that, and they also knew that Howard had sacrificed all of this money, not understanding and being more concerned about the marchers than they were about the future of their economic growth and development. Yeah, so Dr. Frederick teases me all the time. He says, has God spoken to you lately, Sister Cathy? I said, I'll get back to you when he does. Okay. I'm like, yeah, it's called TV One. It's called, okay, right.
That's
not
right.
giving away my
That's
baby
right.
ever again.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wow, Cathy, that is just an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, because I know Quiet Storm really touched this sister right here. So, so I want to ask you one question. everybody has people who are critical of them. Some people call them another name. It starts with an H. And I would like to know, I think our audience would like to know, how did you come face to face, because I know you came face to face with a lot of it. When you came face to face with this harsh criticism of who you are and what you wanted to do, how did you handle it? And because it served, to me, it served like a building block of your format being heard of over 82% of African American homes and businesses. How did you handle it? And how did you not strike back?
Number one, I'm my mama's oldest.
Firstborn. Okay.
Firstborn, and couldn't nobody be harder on me than my mama was.
Okay.
My mother believes in humility. My mother was highly accomplished, but never, ever got besides herself, never became a diva. Was, dated Nat King Cole and all the greats of her era, but always was just mama, and always kept all of us in our place. And my mama taught me a trick, because my mama came through an era where sisterhood wasn't something that was promoted. And my mother said that you need sisterhood in order to grow into your full potential. You cannot do it by yourself. It takes other women who look like you to get you to where you need to go. She said, but sometimes sisterhood can be a little brutal, because sometimes your sisters might be telling you something that may not necessarily be true. And sometimes they don't really realize that God is using them to be critical of you, or to be mean-spirited, to push you, to show them that they wrong. So my mother taught me a trick that I'll share with you all, and I share it with my students all the time. I don't allow people to bring me bad news. I love the whiz where Evelina said, don't bring me no bad news. I don't know that there are people who don't like me. I assume that everybody. I'm loving that. I love it. My mother told me, my mother was incredibly beautiful, incredibly talented. And she said, if I had to listen to folks who I thought were my friends discouraging me and being disloyal, my whole personality would have changed.
Oh, yeah.
And so I do not let anybody bring me no bad news. When I was doing my radio show for 11 years, I used to hate it because I'd have to straighten them out. They go, Miss Hughes, I don't care what anybody says. I love you. I said, well, number one, you shouldn't have been listening to what anybody said.
Absolutely.
And even if you listen, you definitely should not be repeating it to me.
That's right.
Okay? And so I've lived by that. I live every morning, I thank God that I'm alive. I believe that you have to love our people more than we've been taught to hate ourselves.
Yes.
And I do. I do. I love my heritage. I love my African blood. I love my sisters.
Yes.
And I love my sisters sometimes more than they actually dislike themselves. And because of that, I don't hear nothing. I'm serious. I mean, I know it may sound crazy, but I didn't know that everybody didn't love Cathy Hughes. I thought everybody was like the folks in North Carolina, okay? And I have to honestly say the people in Washington, D.C. have made that true for me. D.C. is a very closed community.
It is.
Okay?
Yes, it is.
All right, they will tell you quick, well, you might have been born here, but your mama was from North Carolina, okay, or South Carolina. A lot of South Carolinians, okay? And for some reason, they wrapped their arms around me, they embraced me, they loved me, they supported me, they nurtured me, just like Dr. Cheek. What are the chances of the president of Howard University paying the tuition and room and board for you to go to Harvard for 6 weeks? Okay?
That's right. That's right.
And that was controversial, I'm sure, with his board. He had to explain that, So I love my community. And so I only get that love back. And I also have learned that when someone does get through and make me realize that I'm not as, special as I might, convince myself. I analyze it because,
Yes.
like my mother said, it's going to push me to a higher level.
Absolutely.
To prove to them I am that special.
Absolutely.
Okay? I am that driven. It's what propelled me in business.
Absolutely.
I cannot tell you how many people, including my mama, told me I was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag. I was washing up in the public bathroom. I didn't know I was homeless, though, until I was introduced like that one time. Oh, I was highly insulted. I was being initiated. I'm an honorary member of the AKAs, and they talked about how I was homeless, and now they were so proud of me. Afterwards, I called the sister aside. I said, "Excuse me, I was never homeless." She said, "Well, Miss Hughes, you were living in a sleeping bag, sleeping on the floor, and washing up in a public bathroom." I said, "Yes." She said, "That's the definition of homeless." I said, "Thank you very much." Another duh moment for me. Okay. So I really try to take criticism as a growth opportunity.
Yes.
I really try to see what it is about what I'm doing. I just got elected Monday as the only third in the history of the Black Caucus Foundation. The Congressional Black Caucus has a foundation that does the dinner and the week every week.
Mm-hmm.
It's illegal for the caucus to do it themselves, and it's actually the foundation that does it. I was just elected their chair. And it's only, thank you. Yeah. Pray for me, because I've always been politically incorrect. Okay?
I get you.
Yeah, okay?
I get you. I
Yeah,
understand.
please pray for me on that. But and there was a lot of criticism. All right, she's in the media. How do we know we can trust her? And blah, blah, blah. But I really sat back and I analyzed it, and I said, how can I convince these individuals that just because someone is in the media does not mean that they're going to use the power of their microphone or their camera to do damage to their community.
Right.
All right, you do not have to. And I say that to individuals who work in major market facilities or in major market publications. I said, you don't have to stake your whole career on whether or not you're pleasing your boss and that you're going to expose something or badmouth something in the black community to further your career. You should stake the development of your career on your ability.
Absolutely.
On your own expertise, on the ability that God put into you. That if they don't like the fact that you're not going to tell on somebody, if they don't like the fact that you're not going to talk badly about somebody, then you really, earlier it was said, you need to find yourself a new nest.
Yeah.
Okay, because
yes.
the nest you in got some worms.
Yes.
Okay, and that is how I've tried to really embrace the criticism. All of us are going to get it. Like
Absolutely.
I said, sometimes it's just, but I love my sisterhood so much, and I love brothers even more than I love the sisterhood. Anybody in the room single?
But men, I think. Men.
Well, people ask me sometimes, Dr. Gail, would you ever get married again? I said, I'll get married as many times until I get it right as necessary.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about, Kathy.
But yeah, I think that we have to learn not to be thin-skinned about it and use it as an opportunity to really grow, because sometimes it's God's way of tapping you on the shoulder.
Absolutely.
Saying that you're really not that special. You could be, but you need to correct this so that you can be.
That is so, those words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Kathy. I always say when people talk to me, want to come to me with stuff, I say, if it doesn't edify, please pass me by.
Thank you. Oh, I love that. I'm going to steal that
So
one.
you go ahead.
If
use
it does
girl,
not edify,
'cause it
pass
works.
me by.
If it doesn't edify, please pass me by.
Yeah.
So I don't, because, we have enough negative stuff even inside our own minds to keep us.
And the reality, particularly when you're an entrepreneur, my mama begged me to go get a good government job. She said, you were doing just fine when you were at Howard.
Yeah.
Why don't you go back to Howard or go get a good government job? Because you sleep. She said, do you know how crazy you look? You're in a sleeping bag on the floor My mama's now 95 years old, and I still throw it up in her face. I said, you see how crazy I look, Mama? She'll like, leave me alone. I'm old.
I'm so glad she lived to see this.
Oh, yeah, she lived to
That's
see
a
it.
wonderful
95
gift.
years old.
Yes.
But she told me that because she loved me. Sometimes the worst damn advice you get comes from folks who really do care about you.
I know. Ooh,
They don't want to see you struggling.
They
They don't want to
scared.
see you hurting.
Yes.
My mama didn't tell me that because she didn't think I could do it. She didn't want me in a sleeping bag because it looked crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, to her. It didn't look crazy to me at all. The best time of my life because I was starting my business and I was there 24/7.
Yes.
I didn't have a choice. I was living in my business, washing up in the public bathroom, sometimes forgetting my underwear. And the staff thought it was funny. Whose bra is this? Okay, I'll snatch the bra and say, you know whose bra it is, okay? All right. But it was such a blessing. Again, sometimes we see challenges, we see disappointments. I had lost my house. I stood in my window and watched them repossess my car. I said, how stupid is this bank? How do they think I'm going to get down there to bring them the little bit of money I do have? I'm not going to take a bus to bring you your money.
Right.
Okay, you should have left my car alone, but
Absolutely.
I had lost my car. Okay, I'm very honorable, okay?
Yes.
I'm going to pay you your money. I just might not have had it today, okay? But, I mean, I lost everything. And it was such a blessing because for 24/7, I was in my business. I was there, and many a night, midnight to overnight jock would get sick, couldn't come in. Guess who had to run the board? There were times where I needed to be there, and I didn't have to travel any further than down the hall.
Oh,
No further than down the
what a
hall.
blessing.
So what a lot of people call a Horatio Alger story, picking. No, it was the best time of my life because I learned more about my business and my employees. That's of the 14. I started off with 14 people. 11 of them are still with me today, 40 years later. Yeah. Excuse me, and by the way, this is the most important part.
What?
Enter millionaires, because when I went public, I saw.
Yes. That is, so you took care of your people.
Absolutely.
You took care of your
people.
people.
I gotta say that.
Come
I
on.
got all these Cathy.
Come on, Cathy.
If you're in business, don't worry about your bottom line more than you worry about your front line. Your front line will take care of that bottom line for you. Take care of your people.
That's
the
awesome.
most important thing. Your most important asset is not whatever your business venture is the people who empower you to be in business because they're working alongside you.
I was going to ask you to leave us with a nugget of wisdom, and I know you have so much because me and you could sit here all day. Because listening to you, couldn't you just listen to her all day? I mean,
thank you, Dr.
I'm sitting
Gail.
over here gleaning all of this stuff, especially since I'm not sleeping on the floor though, so, and using the public toilet, but just about. But you know, I'm hearing you, and it's resonating with me, and I know it's resonating with a lot of you out there. No matter what you decide to do, that what you just said, take care of your front line as opposed to your bottom line, and that front line will take care of you.
You gotta take care of the bottom line, but I said don't care more.
Don't care more about it.
About
Yes,
the bottom line
yes.
than you do your front line, because if you take care of your front line, they will help you take care of the
your bottom line. Got you.
That's the order that it needs to be in.
Got you.
Dr. Gail, I can't tell you how honored I was. A closing story.
Okay.
Years ago, I was talking to a young person. I was talking to Minister Farrakhan, and a young person came up to me and interrupted us. And the minister took exception with it. He said, I just need to ask Miss Hughes for her card. That's the reason, Brother Minister, I wasn't trying to interrupt. And he said, young man, if Allah blesses you and you do the will of God, two things in life you should aspire never to need. The first is a resume, and the second is a business card. And I share that with you all. If you really do the will of God, if you really are living your life to your full potential, you should never need a resume. They'll come get you.
Yes.
Okay, they will find you. Okay? And you don't need the business card because they'll get your number. Okay? You do not need to identify who you are or what your qualifications are. Your life to speak for itself.
Cathy, I think that was the perfect closing
Thank you.
for our interview today. I can't tell you how honored I am to be sitting in this seat. And I'm thankful to our minds, our voices, that they would allow me to sit here in
I
this
love
seat.
this. Our minds and our voices.
And I tell you, for me being a media personality and getting, when they said Cathy, I said, Cathy Hughes. I said, breathe, Gail, breathe. Breathe. I said, I got to tell the Quiet Storm story because it has impacted my life almost on a cellular level, coming in contact with my community and I'm a bridge between the races now. I do a lot in the European community, and then I bring it back to our community if people want it, if they want to listen sometimes, because sometimes we have to deal with the other community. So, oftentimes. So I want to say to you, thank you for so graciously answering these questions. I didn't even need this. I mean, you just took it to the bridge. And I just stood on the bridge and listened. And so I want to thank you for sharing so graciously and generously with us and being a part of the Our Minds, Our Voices celebration. And I want to also say, I am so excited that you are the 2019 Woman of Influence for Our Minds, Our Voices.
Thank you.